What's happening? Happy Monday to all of you. Thanks for joining me. As always, it is much appreciated. Before we get into the Combine talk, a couple of news updates as well. I want to start here. A week from today, a new era of the podcast will begin. A formal announcement coming up on Friday, so stay tuned for that. But a new era of the podcast will begin a week from today. Mark it down, March 3rd. A new era for the podcast. Can't wait to get started. Can't wait for all of you to continue to be involved. So keep an eye out and an ear out for that news coming up. Speaking of news, interesting news from the NFL today. Alex Van Pelt has joined the LA Rams staff as a senior offensive assistant. I think this tells us how well respected Van Pelt is throughout the game. The idea that Sean McVay, one of the smartest, one of the best head coaches in football, brought Van Pelt onto his staff as a senior offensive assistant should tell us that Van Pelt is no joke. Now, do I think he's a great offensive coordinator? I do not. But do I think he did a very good job with Drake May last year? I do. Do I think he's respected? Do I think he's good at what he does? Yes. And so Van Pelt to the Rams as a senior offensive assistant. Interesting news. Van Pelt has a job, and it's with Sean McVay of all people. Of course, the Patriots took Thomas Brown onto their staff this year. He is a Sean McVay disciple in some cases, in essence. So Thomas Brown, you gain a guy from the McVay tree. Van Pelt leaves and ends up going to McVay to join the tree. We'll see what kind of senior offensive assistant role he takes, what his involvement is for the LA Rams. Of course, the Rams, they're kind of in an interesting period here with Matthew Stafford. Stafford and his agent, they've been given permission to gauge interest around the league to try to figure out how much he's going to cost the Rams. So when you think about the Rams having to eventually reset at the quarterback position, having Van Pelt on your staff makes sense with his history of working with quarterbacks. All right, let's get into the NFL Draft Combine preview, 2025 style. We're going to talk about some of the major storylines at the Combine this week and how those storylines tie in, impact the Patriots. That's what we will do today. But before we get into this Combine talk and before we start diving into the draft with full body plunge, let's not forget this. Free agency is going to play a role in the offseason operation, right? Who did the Patriots sign? Who do they try to sign? Who can they sign? That's going to impact what they do in late April. If you sign Ronnie Stanley or Alaric Jackson, if those guys are eventually available once free agency hits, if you sign one of those left tackles, then obviously you have less urgency to address the tackle position in the draft in late April. So everything will be impacted by the decisions that are made first and foremost during the free agent period, which, of course, as we know, begins on March 10th when teams can start tampering, even though we know teams are really starting to tamper this week and even before this week. So free agency will impact what the Patriots do during the draft weekend in late April, 2 months from now. Some Combine notes. Shedeur Sanders is not going to throw at the Combine. So Sanders says, I'm not going to throw the football at the Combine. Tom Pelissero today of the NFL Network, he's reporting that Cam Ward, there's some uncertainty around Cam Ward and whether or not he's going to throw the football at the Combine as well. So we might have the two top quarterback prospects in this draft deciding not to throw the ball at the Combine. I mean, even Ashton Genty, we found out today, is not going to take part in the Combine. Most of the stuff that happens in Indy. And this is, I think, something we're going to see happen with a lot of the top-tier talent. As years go on and agents talk to their players more and more about what the wins and losses are from going to the Combine, I'm not going to be surprised if we see less people going to the Combine and doing these drills. They'll take part in their pro days. The pro day numbers, especially when you talk about the 40-yard dash, a lot of times those numbers are boosted. They're juiced, which makes the prospect look better. And the pro day is a more controlled environment, even more controlled than the combine because the prospects have full say in what they're going to do at their pro day. So I'm not surprised. I think as time goes on, we have to be ready for more of this, more of these top prospects passing on these combine drills and saying, no, I'll just go to my pro day. You guys can figure it out from that point moving forward. So Sanders not throwing, Ward uncertain to throw, Ashton Genty not going to be involved much at all on the field at the combine. And this stuff impacts New England. Now, less so with Genty, obviously, because I don't think the Patriots are going to be looking to draft a running back in the first round. I don't think they're going to be looking at drafting a running back in the top 2 or 3 rounds. So the Genty thing, we can put that off to the side. But looking at Sanders and Ward, their decisions, how they handle this process, how their interviews go, how their pro days go, and how much teams change their thought about the top 2 quarterbacks in this class obviously has a direct impact to the Patriots because the Patriots are sitting at 4. If Ward and Sanders both go in the top 4, that guarantees the Patriots to have a shot at either Abdul Carter or Travis Hunter, the 2 blue chip prospects in this draft. So we have to keep a close eye on what happens with these quarterbacks, the good and the bad, and how it is impacting their quote-unquote value come draft night. Because if you get a situation where Ward goes to Tennessee, for example, Sanders goes to the Giants at 3, well, now we know the Patriots will have a shot at one of the top 2 prospects in this draft. If you don't have both guys go in the top 3 or neither goes in the top 3, then that changes the entire landscape for the Patriots at 4 because now Travis Hunter is off the board. Obviously, Abdul Carter is off the board. If a quarterback falls to the Patriots at 4, could they possibly trade down to a team that wants to draft one of those 2 quarterbacks at 4? So we have to keep all of this in mind when we talk about the quarterbacks. The Patriots obviously don't need one going into this draft, but where those guys go and how that position is played within the first round of the draft will have that impact on the Pats. Speaking of the Giants and Shedeur Sanders, Jordan Renan from ESPN reported today that multiple league insiders are convinced the Giants have their sights on Sanders. So according to Renan, who is obviously the beat guy for ESPN with the Giants, he says multiple league insiders are convinced the Giants are going to draft Shedeur Sanders. And that would happen at 3. I don't think they're going to move down and risk losing the quarterback. And Renan also says, even if the Giants come free agency week, even if the Giants add a veteran quarterback like a Jameis Winston, for example, the possibility of drafting a quarterback at the top of the draft still remains a strong possibility. So it sounds like the Giants are very interested in spending that 3rd overall pick on a quarterback this year. So if that's the case, and we had the West-East Shrine game and practices, right? And people were saying that Sanders sat down with the top 3 teams in the draft, spoke to each team for about an hour, and then Sanders decided not to practice at the East-West Shrine game, which would lead you to believe that what Sanders had to say during those interviews and how the team interacted with Sanders during those sit-down interviews, it would lead you to believe that Sanders felt very good about the possibility of him being drafted at the top of the draft in 2 months. So some of this is reading the tea leaves. Some of this is being reported out. But I think as we get ready here for the combine this week, Sanders is not going to be throwing. So where does Sanders land? I think a lot of people are pretty confident that Cam Ward will get drafted in the top 3. Where does Sanders land? We got to keep an eye on the New York Giants. Couple of other things about the combine this week before we get into speaking about specific players in the Patriots. Mike Vrabel will talk to the media tomorrow. So Vrabel will talk to the media tomorrow. Elliott Wolf speaks on Wednesday. Now, some people might say, why is Elliott Wolf speaking? Doesn't Mike Vrabel have the hammer? Yes, I believe Mike Vrabel has the hammer. I don't think Elliott Wolf is making the final call this offseason on any player, whether it's free agency, retaining guys like Sione Takitaki, or drafting anybody. I don't think Elliott Wolf has the final say. So why is Elliott Wolf speaking to the media? I think it all has to do with title. If the Patriots announced to the world that Elliott Wolf no longer has the final say, they would have to put somebody above Elliott Wolf when it comes to the food chain. And if you want to put somebody above Elliott Wolf, then you have to go through the process, which means you've got to go out and interview people. You've got to go through the Rooney Rule. I don't think the Patriots want anything to do with that. I don't think they want to change any titles. I think Elliott Wolf is well aware who has the stroke in this organization. It's certainly not him. We've talked about this the last couple of months. I would not be concerned about Elliott Wolf speaking to the media. I think he's going to serve his purpose. He's going to go out there and be the face of the combine in certain aspects because the Patriots do not want to open up the process and have to go through changing titles and names and putting somebody above Elliott Wolf, because you have to tell the NFL who is responsible for making these final decisions. So even if they have Elliott Wolf written down as the guy who's making the decision, I can promise you he's not making the decision, as we've talked about. But Elliott Wolf will speak to the media on Wednesday. It'll be the first time he has spoken to the media since August. So we'll see what Vrabel says tomorrow. We will see what Elliott Wolf says on Wednesday. And, of course, we will react to what is said right here on the podcast on Wednesday afternoon. All right. Before I get started, I want to start with Travis Hunter. Before I get to Travis Hunter, don't forget to help us out. Let's build this community. Again, we are going to evolve as a podcast. More details on that later this week. A new era of the podcast starts a week from today on March 3rd. But let's continue to build the community. And how we do that is take advantage of the algorithm. Press that thumbs up. Click on that thumbs up button. Don't forget to like the podcast. Don't forget to throw comments in as well, because comments help us. So likes and comments help us with that algorithm. And don't forget to subscribe. The next goal is going to be 6,500 subscribers by round one of the draft. We should be able to get there. We've got 2 months. We've got 2 months to hit 6,500 subscribers. Maybe I should go up to 7,000, but I don't want to get too far ahead of myself. Let's start with 6,500 subscribers by the first round of the NFL draft. That is the next goal, 6,500 by night one of the NFL draft. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. We are over 6,000. 6,500 is the next goal. So like, comment, subscribe, and, of course, Spotify, Apple Pods, rate, and review. All right, going to get to Travis Hunter in a minute. Vitalix wants to talk about Travis Hunter, $20 super chat. Thank you, Vitalix. Can a team use Hunter as a chess piece and move him around based on need for that particular week, or does that just spell a contract nightmare? Do you pay him as a DB or wide receiver at that point? Hunter is fascinating. Thanks. I don't think you can swap him in and out of positions from week to week, Vitalix, because it just takes way too much at the NFL level to study up on teams, prepare for teams. And when you ask somebody to do something like that, I think you're robbing them the chance of being as good as they could be at one position. So I don't think Hunter is going to go from full-time cornerback 1 week to full-time wide receiver another week. I do think that he can play both positions, not full-time, and under certain circumstances, which we will get into. But thank you for the $20 super chat, Vitalix. It is very much appreciated. All right, all eyes are on Travis Hunter. Now, we start with him speaking to the media this week. I want to know where Hunter wants to play. I want that to be the first question asked of Travis Hunter. If I am at his press conference this week, if I ask him a question, the question I'm asking him is, Travis, you played both defensive back and wide receiver at Colorado. Which position would you rather play? Would you rather be a receiver or would you rather be a cornerback? What is your desire in the NFL? What do you want? Where do you want to play? Because right now he's listed as a cornerback for the combine, but Burt Breer and others have talked about this. That's more about logistics and how the combine schedule lays out. And if he was listed as a wide receiver, he wouldn't be able to do anything with the cornerbacks. So it's more about the, order of operation in Indy versus it's Travis Hunter announcing to the world that he wants to be a cornerback. So that's my first question. Where do you want to play? Where do you envision yourself playing? Wide receiver or cornerback? Because I need to know that answer as I get ready for the draft, as I'm gathering information. And the question is, does it matter to the Patriots? Does it matter to the Patriots if Hunter goes out there and says, I want to be a cornerback? Does it matter to the Patriots if Hunter goes out there and says he wants to be a wide receiver? Daniel Jeremiah and Todd McShay spoke with Burt Breer this week, and Burt has a long write-up on the draft combine this week. Some great stuff from him. Here's what Jeremiah said about Travis Hunter. Quote, I thought he was more impactful offensively just because he's touching the ball so much. I saw that for 2 years. Last year, corner-wise, and doing him over the summer, he was a little more raw, not as consistent. He was more on the impactful side offensively. He's improved drastically coverage-wise from last year to this year. So Daniel Jeremiah says Travis Hunter had more impact as a receiver than he did as a cornerback. Todd McShay says, quote, I think he's a more advanced receiver and better receiver than he is corner. But I don't see a scenario where he's a full-time receiver that you're working in packages as a corner. I think it's the reverse. My plan would very likely be let's develop him as a corner and put in installs every week where we utilize him at wide receiver, unquote. So both Jeremiah and McShay say they think that Travis Hunter is a better wide receiver than he is a corner. But McShay says he would actually play Hunter at corner because it's easier to devote the time to cornerback and sprinkle him in at wide receiver than it is the other way around. Burt Breer writes, McShay compared Hunter's receiver skills to Garrett Wilson. Jeremiah's comp was Devontae Smith on offense and Darius Slade Jr. on defense. Not too shabby. Breer writes that Hunter's football character is also off the charts, as is his ability, mental acumen, toughness, and endurance to play both ways would indicate. So some fascinating stuff. Some fascinating stuff about Travis Hunter from Burt Breer, speaking with Daniel Jeremiah, Todd McShay, two of the best pundits in the business. Where do the Patriots value him? That's the question. Do the Patriots value Hunter more as a corner, or do they value him more as a receiver? We don't know. I mean, the natural inclination is that Mike Vrabel's a defensive guy, and so maybe Vrabel would want him at corner more than receiver, but we don't know. And how much will Vrabel lean on Elliott Wolf and the scouting staff, that front office that's been working on Hunter over the past couple of years? How much will he value their opinion? If Vrabel goes to Elliott Wolf and Cam Williams and others in that front office and they say, no, we absolutely think that Travis Hunter is a wide receiver first and foremost, does Vrabel agree with that, or does Vrabel disagree and say, I think he's going to be a better corner, and I think he has the ability to be a top corner? And so if we draft Travis Hunter, that's where I want to play him. So where do the Patriots value him? In what drills does Travis Hunter run this week? How does he look running those drills? Some people say he might not be as spectacular as an athlete as others think, but on the film, he looks fantastic. So where does Hunter want to play? How much does that impact his value in the draft with everybody? How much does it impact the value with the Patriots? Do they see him as a receiver or a corner? Is he willing to just go along with what the team wants? These are all interesting questions that have to be answered and hopefully will be over the next week or so. All right, point number 2 for the Patriots this week at the Combine, Will Campbell. We've talked a lot about Will Campbell. Obviously, by now, many of you know who Will Campbell is. LSU left tackle, has terrific numbers as a starter at LSU, is seen as the top offensive lineman in this draft. But as we've said the past few weeks, and we will continue to say this up until Sunday, the arm measurement, the arm length, where does Will Campbell come in? Because NFL scouts and GMs and a lot of the pundits will tell you, if you don't have 33-inch arm length, you're not a tackle. Now, some people disagree with that and say there's some leeway. There's a little leeway one way or the other, right? You could say, oh, well, maybe it's 1/8 of an inch or, a quarter, whatever it is. Some believe that you can still play tackle at the NFL level if you have slightly under 33-inch arms. But that's the number we're all going to be looking for. Now, of course, the question is, what if Will Campbell, he's going to measure on Sunday, by the way, so we're 6 days away. What if Will Campbell's arm measurement comes back as like 32 7/8? Are the Patriots really going to sit back and say we can't draft this guy as a tackle because of 1/8 of an inch when it comes to arm length? Of course, they could have Dante Scarnecchia on speed dial. Ask him. Doug Marrone has been around forever. Marrone's the O-line coach. He will be involved. The front office will be involved. What's interesting is when Vrabel was in Tennessee, Taylor Lewan was his left tackle, and Lewan had almost 34-inch arms. He was 33 7/8. So if you go off of Tennessee, you go off of who Vrabel's left tackle was with the Titans, you'd say 32 7/8 might not be enough for Vrabel to believe that Campbell's a left tackle, but we don't know. We don't know if that's his personal opinion. Vrabel might look at it and say 32 7/8, it's 1/8 of an inch. Who cares? I couldn't care less. He's a tackle. He's going to play left tackle. And you have to ask the question of whether or not Campbell's athleticism, his strength, his technique, do those things make up for a lack of arm length? Some people say that he has trouble facing speed rushers and that would be a much bigger issue in the NFL. So some say they don't think he's a tackle no matter what his arm length is. Many people say he's a tackle if he passes the arm length test. Some people say, including Jeremiah and McShay, that it doesn't really matter. They think he's a tackle even if he comes up short of 33-inch arm length. So 6 days from now, the measurements on Will Campbell going to be very, very important, crucial. And a big part of the problem, folks, is that left tackle in this class, it's just not good. It's not good enough. Burt Breer, writing on Campbell, said, when I asked what position you wouldn't want to be looking for in this year's class, safety and left tackle were the two that McShay and Jeremiah came back to Breer with. Here's what McShay said, quote, I'd be pissed off if I'm a team like New England where I desperately need a tackle. Where's my Joe Alt? Campbell's a really good player, steady as can be. I think he'll be a good tackle. So McShay says he thinks Campbell will be a good tackle. And he says, I do, despite the arm length. It's just not the prototype I'm looking for if I have a top 5 pick and I got this franchise quarterback that I need to protect. Burt Breer writes, asked if someone could evolve into a franchise left tackle in the class. Jeremiah responded, I think Campbell's that guy. Adding that it reminded him a bit of Rashawn Slater, who had less than ideal measurables for the position. If you're wondering, Rashawn Slater had 33-inch arms. So again, is 1/8 of an inch of arm length going to change the math dramatically for the Patriots in this draft? I don't know. I mean, I'd say 1/8 of an inch. If I like the film, I like the film. If I love the film, I love the film. 1/8 of an inch is not going to stop me from drafting somebody who I think could be a good to really good tackle at the NFL level. It's just not going to change dramatically for me. But I'm also not, scientific and this guy, 1/8 of an inch could be the end of the world. I don't know how the Patriots feel. Again, how do the Patriots feel about Travis Hunter? Does where he wants to play, does that change how the Patriots value him in the draft? How do the Patriots feel about arm length at tackle? Is it significant? Is it necessary? I think Dante Scarnecchia has been less worried about arm length. So how do they feel? The other part of Will Campbell, and I've got to underline this for many people that are listening, watching the show right now. And again, thank you. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to help us build this podcast out. Like, comment, and subscribe. That's how you can help us with that algorithm. Another thing that we've got to make sure that everybody is aware of, because of this draft and the nature of this specific draft, I said last year as we went into the draft that drafts are like snowflakes, right? They're all different. And so if you look at this draft, there's not a lot of top tier talent, not a lot of blue chip guys. So usually when you say, oh, well, Will Campbell, I don't think he's good enough to be drafted at 4 overall, if he's a good tackle or a really good tackle, like, should he go at number 4 or should you aim higher at that spot? This year's draft, there's really not much difference between the guy who's going to go 4th and 9th, 10th, 11th. There's really not a huge drop-off as far as talent goes. So when you look at somebody like Will Campbell, I know many will say that's too high for Will Campbell. I would say it's too high for Will Campbell if you don't think he's a tackle. If you think he's a tackle, drafting Campbell at 4 is not this like ridiculous, absurd reach. No pun intended. Because drafting him at 4, there's not much difference to the guy you're going to draft at 8 or 9 or 10. So I just don't think there's this huge drop-off. If you think he's a tackle, you evaluate him as a tackle. His arms are long enough to, make you feel like he can play tackle at the next level, then I don't think it's crazy that Campbell goes 4. All right, moving on. How about wide receiver at number 4? For me, and this is just me, if I'm drafting a wide receiver in the top 5, that guy needs to have a generational trait or generational traits, plural. And everybody was talking about Tet McMillan over the last couple of weeks. Tet McMillan seemingly needs a huge combine this week. Here's what Burt Breer wrote this week about Tet McMillan. The more teams have dug into McMillan, the more he seems to have slipped, going from a surefire top 10 guy into probably the middle of the first round. Now, I have to warn everybody, it's lying season. We all know that. We're all prepared for it. As we get closer to the draft, more people are going to lie. It's possible that there are teams that are, from the 7 to 12 range, let's say, that want Tet McMillan. And it is in their best interest to leak that McMillan is slipping and he might fall all the way to the middle of the first round. Now, I would hope that Burt Breer, who's done this for a long time, understands that, understands agendas, has built that into approaching these stories and writing this stuff about these prospects and says, I'm not buying that. This is shenanigans. That team wants McMillan. I'm not going to buy into that. So if it's not lying because it's lying season, Tet McMillan slipping towards the middle of the first round is fascinating, and it would certainly tell you that McMillan, if the Patriots agree with this thought process, has no chance of going at number 4. And I've said from the beginning, I think drafting Tet McMillan would be a reach at 4. I don't think he's that type of generational receiver. I just don't think he's that guy. Could end up being wrong. Wouldn't be the first time. But this is going to be a huge week for him. How fast is he? Can he consistently separate? Is he all world at contested catches? How high of a level does Tet need to get during this week to be considered a top 5 guy, a top 8 guy? We'll see. But it feels like he needs a big-time week. Now, I think for the Patriots, wide receiver-wise, what's interesting to me is maybe trying to trade back into the first round. Now, reportedly, Elliott Wolf attempted to do that last year. It didn't work out. But if I'm the Patriots, I would much rather try to trade into the first round somewhere in the 20s, looking at guys like Emeka Egbuka, Luther Burden. You also have Matthew Golden. Those guys somewhere in the 20s, to me, would make a hell of a lot more sense than drafting Tet McMillan in the top 5. A hell of a lot more. So I think that might be something where the Patriots, if they want to get creative and they want to address the wide receiver position in the draft, they don't want to bank on drafting somebody in the later rounds, in the mid rounds. Maybe you try to get back into that first round somewhere in the 20s and look at one of those 3 guys, Egbuka, Golden, or Burden, and maybe they make sense. By the way, Luther Burden, interesting week for him. There are some questions about his willingness to play hard at times. When he doesn't get the football, how he reacts to that kind of stuff. So Luther Burden's going to have a pretty important week in the interview room. But I think looking at those 3 receivers makes more sense for the Patriots than it would drafting McMillan in the top 5. I don't see them drafting McMillan at 4. Could be wrong. I just don't see it. All right, I got 2 more thoughts. But first, new era of the podcast. It's happening on March 3rd, a week from today. A new era for this podcast. We will have details on that on Friday. If you want earlier than Friday details, my Patreon page, I think I'm going to do something for my Patreon members. Patreon.com/Nick Cattles, $5 a month. But a new era for the podcast starts a week from today. All right. Fourth point. Here's the good news for the Patriots. Here's the good news about this draft for the Patriots and Patriots fans. Defensive edge is beefy in this draft. And what I mean by that is there's lots of depth and potential starters in this draft at defensive end. And edge to me is the second most important position where the Patriots have a hole. I think it's their second need, so to speak. We talked about this last week. I'd say tackle, left tackle is your number one need. I would say defensive end is a big-time need right behind left tackle. So when you look at this draft, there's lots of depth and potential starters at edge. Here's what Todd McShay said to Burt Breer. Quote, I've got 20 guys I think are worth drafting in the first 3 rounds and a few guys after that on the edge. It's absurd, unquote. Burt writes, the edge rusher group starts with the aforementioned Abdul Carter, Jalen Walker, but goes well beyond just those two hybrids. He brings up Georgia teammate of not Abdul Carter, because Abdul Carter did not play at Georgia. He played at Penn State. That's obviously a miss by Burt. What he meant was Jalen Walker's Georgia teammate, Mykel Williams, Texas A&M's Shamar Stewart. They look like they were built in pass rusher labs. Tennessee's James Pierce Jr. isn't quite as big as those guys, but maybe better on tape. Then you've got Marshall's Mike Green, Ohio State's Jack Sawyer, and the list goes on. So you have a lot of talent at defensive end. You've got a lot of talent at edge. And Mike Vrabel's defense, we're going to see 4-man fronts. We're going to see even-man fronts an awful lot. So they want those two ends. And they are more aggressive defensively as well, as we've seen from Belichick, Steve Belichick, and last year with DeMarcus Covington. They want guys at defensive end that can rush the passer. They're not as worried about containing the edge against the run game. So when you look at what the Patriots need, and when you look at style of defense and that change under Terrell Williams and Mike Vrabel, this is good news for the Patriots. Edge is deep in this draft. And not just deep by numbers, deep by talent. Like when you look at guys that can start day one for you, there's a number of them in this draft. So the Patriots, it doesn't look like Abdul Carter is going to be there at 4, okay? That looks very unlikely. If Abdul Carter is not there at 4, and if you don't want to take a swing on a Jalen Walker or, any of the other guys like Mykel Williams, I think Shamar Stewart's lower than that. But if you don't want to take a big swing at one of the Georgia cats and Carter's not there, it doesn't mean you lose at edge. You can find guys in this draft in the second round. You can find guys in the third round in this draft. You might even find a couple guys in the fourth round in this draft that could make an impact for you at edge. So that's great news for the Patriots. It's a big-time need, and it's an area that has a surplus in this draft of talent. And remember, Vrabel has the hammer. At least I think he has the hammer. Defensive guy, defensive line, has lots of depth and talent in this draft. Defensive tackle is very deep in this draft, but you have a lot of bigger guys like over 300 pounds. That's usually not what Vrabel looks for. Vrabel looks for Jeffrey Simmons, Christian Barmore types. So I don't know how many defensive tackles Vrabel would look at in this class and say, oh, I love those guys. But defensive line has a lot of depth. I'm looking mostly at the ends. Great opportunity for the Patriots. Here's my fifth point about the combine this week. Tight ends, running backs. Both of those classes are very good. You want to talk about loaded. Those two positional groups are loaded with talent. Tight end, running back. You've got day 3 potential starters, honestly, at both positions. You could find a potential starter at tight end day 3 of this draft, and I feel really confident that you would be able to find a starting running back in day 3 of this draft. The running back, we could have 15, 20 running backs that are legitimate running backs for the next level. And I'm not just talking about, Genty and Henderson and Hampton. I'm not just talking about those guys. I mean, this running backs class is ridiculous. And the tight ends class is deep. So the Patriots, if you look at the roster, they could stand getting younger at both of those spots, right? Hunter Henry, Austin Hooper at tight end, if you bring Hooper back. Both of those guys getting older. We're all getting older, but they're getting older NFL-wise. So it would not be a terrible idea. I'm not saying in the top 3 rounds, but it would not be a terrible idea if you look for a young tight end to develop and say, all right, maybe in 2026, 2027, that young guy takes over, and then Henry slides to your second, right? I mean, if the Patriots love Warren enough, Tyler Warren, they could certainly try to trade down and draft him or take a huge swing at 4 for him. I don't think that's going to happen. But when you look at the tight ends in this class, there's a great opportunity for the Patriots to address that position, get younger. Of course, we all know, right? They have Jaheim Bell on this roster as well. So if you could draft another tight end in the middle to late rounds and you have Jaheim Bell and you have that other guy, well, now we're talking. And maybe Bell is ready to take over for Hooper. We didn't see enough on the field for him, so I'm not sure. But they certainly have tight end at least on the list of positions that they need to start thinking about going into the next couple of years. So tight end, you have a lot of talent in this draft at tight end. Running back's the same thing, right? Antonio Gibson signed a multi-year deal. I would think he'll be back, but who knows? I don't know how Vrabel and Cowden feel about him. I don't know how Josh McDaniels feels about him. I would think that Antonio Gibson is a great fit with McDaniels with his past of, receiving running backs. I didn't think that Alex Van Pelt used Gibson nearly enough last year. He's a tremendous receiver. We didn't see much of that at all. So I would think that McDaniels would want Antonio Gibson on this team. But Ramondre Stevenson, is he a full-time back anymore? I love Ramondre heading into the season and said, looking back at 2023, he had some injury issues, got off to a slow start, but then he really found himself as the season went on before he was done. And then last year he had the fumble problems. And again, he had some inconsistency. How much of it was the offensive line? Do you feel like Ramondre Stevenson? Does Mike Vrabel feel like Ramondre Stevenson is a 20 to 25 carry guy? Does he look at him and say, oh, he's a 25 touch per week guy? Or does he look at Stevenson and say he's a 10 to 15 touch guy? What I would do personally, if I'm the Patriots, I would keep Stevenson, but I would limit his touches because I think he loses his value. I think he loses his impact the more he runs the ball throughout the year. So I think going into 2025, I'm looking at Ramondre Stevenson as a 10 to 15 touch per game guy. So I think the Patriots could certainly be in the market for a young running back in this draft because the draft is so damn loaded. So if you can find one of those guys, once you hit the 5th round, 4th, 5th round, you start looking tight end, running back. There's going to be some value there. There's going to be guys that can start in the NFL that are going to be sitting there for you in the 4th round, 5th round. And do you take the swing on the talent? Because the Patriots could get younger at both of those spots, tight end and running back. It would help them. But looking at it, it's a good draft. I know a lot of people, I said this, yesterday on the Sports Hub when I hosted. I know a lot of people are crapping on this draft. I think people are crapping on this draft because the quarterback class is not sexy and the wide receiver class is not sexy. And we always go off of the national media when we hit draft time, right? With all the national pundits, all the talking heads. And they're always going to try to drive traffic and drive engagement by talking quarterback and receiver, quarterback, receiver, quarterback, receiver. The quarterback class isn't good in totality. The wide receiver class isn't good. I mean, that's why last year's draft was the sexy draft, right? You had 4 or 5, maybe even as many as 6 quarterbacks who could be legitimate NFL quarterbacks in that draft. You had 3 guys going in the top 3 spots. You had wide receivers. You had Marvin Harrison Jr. and Malik Neighbors and Roma Dunze and Brian Thomas Jr., Lad McConkey in the second round. So last year's draft was the sexy draft because it was loaded at quarterback and receiver. This year, that's not the case. So a lot of people are going to talk down on this draft. I think this draft is good. I wouldn't say it's very good. Wouldn't say it's great. But I would say this draft is good. I think you have legitimate NFL talent at defensive end. You've got legitimate NFL talent and depth at defensive tackle. You've got a loaded tight end class. I think you have an absolutely loaded running backs class. And what you have is you have a bunch of guys who could start for you, which isn't a bad thing. You don't have top-tier blue-chip prospects, right? You probably have two of those guys with Carter and Hunter. But it doesn't mean this draft is bad. This draft has a lot of valuable talent in it. If you have, the Patriots have 4 of the top 77 picks in this draft. They have 5 of the top 105. They're going to have opportunity. If they draft well, they have the opportunity to land 2 or 3 starters in the first 4 rounds of this draft, at least. They have to draft well. They have to hit, as we know. But I don't look at this and say the draft, it stinks. I just think people, they're so wrapped up in fantasy football. They're so wrapped up in offense. And specifically quarterback and wide receiver. And then also you look at the tackle position, right? So it's not deep at tackle at all. It's not very good at tackle. We would all agree on that. It's not very good at quarterback. It's not very good at receiver. But you want to look at some other spots. It's not great at safety. Cornerback, you've got a number of cornerbacks in this draft that are good. You got guys that could play cornerback that are going to go second, third round that could end up being pretty damn good for you. So I just think this draft is better than people are giving it credit for because it's not the sexy draft. But I do think the Patriots can do some damage, some good damage, if they draft correctly. It's a big if. It's a big if. But opportunity is going to be there. Like, comment, subscribe. Don't forget to do those 3 things for us. Like, comment, and subscribe. It helps us. Spotify, Apple Pods, rate and review. Mike Vrabel talking tomorrow. Going to be very interesting to see what Vrabel has to say. I want to see how detailed he gets. So it'll be interesting to see Mike Vrabel's interview tomorrow. And then we've got an interview with Elliot Wolf on Wednesday. That, I think, is going to be more fascinating than the Mike Vrabel interview. We will be here on Wednesday at 3 p.m. live, talking about both of those interviews, reacting to both of those interviews, and maybe we get some news over the next couple of days. If it's not gigantic news that we need to do a breaking news podcast, then we'll save it for Wednesday as well. But I appreciate every single one of you. Let's continue to build this podcast, build this YouTube channel. If you like what we do, make sure you subscribe. Back on Wednesday afternoon, it's Combine Week. Things are going to certainly pick up over the next 2 months. Hopefully a lot of fun on the way. Talk to you soon.